It was a Saturday evening in November 2024 when the family of 78-year-old Catherine Washeki tried to reach out to their elderly mother. Upon calling her phone, they discovered that it had been switched off. The family didn't make a big deal out of it at first. They probably thought her mobile phone was out of battery, but they were terribly wrong, and by the time they discovered how wrong they were, it would already be too late. The family tried calling Catherine again, but they still got the same response as before. Her mobile phone remained switched off. This was when things began to get really troubling for them. In a bid to ascertain their elderly mother's whereabouts, the concerned family members reached out to their neighbors and people who were close to Catherine, but all efforts to pinpoint her exact location were to no avail. There is no report on whether Catherine was actually living alone, but from the look of things, it seems she may have been staying alone in her house at Kasarani area of Nairobi, Kenya. It is also not known if any of her family members went to her house to physically check on her after she couldn't be reached. But on Sunday, being the next day, Catherine was reported missing to the Kenyan police. The police swung into action immediately. Detectives were sent to her house to check on her. Catherine lived in a large compound where she was also running a small cattle farm. When the police arrived, they checked the house, but she was nowhere to be found. However, during their search, they came across things that made it clear to them that Catherine was not the only one missing in the house. It turned out that about a month before she went missing, Catherine had employed a casual worker to assist her with things at home and on the cattle farm. It is not known if it was Catherine herself who employed the said person or if it was a family member who did so as a way of helping her. However, the fact remains that being a 78-year-old woman, she needed someone younger and stronger to assist her in feeding her cattle as well as with other chores in the house. In one of the rooms in the building, the police found clothes belonging to the 21-year-old Victor Ambeye, who was employed to assist Mrs. Catherine. However, Victor was nowhere to be found. It was at this point the police began suspecting that there could be something more to Catherine's disappearance than they earlier thought. The detectives extended their search into the cattle farm. No one was present in the shed housing the cattle, but they saw something strange floating in one of the septic tanks used in disposing of the cattle waste from the farm. The floating object was wrapped with a blanket and had been submerged in the tank. The detectives pulled it out of the water, and upon unwrapping it, they discovered a human body. Now, the detectives didn't know what Mrs. Catherine looked like, so they had to call her family members to come and identify the recovered remains. The body was positively identified by the family as that of 78-year-old Catherine Washeki. She had been struck with a blunt object and had also sustained a visible injury at the back of her head. At this point, it was clear to the police that their welfare check had now transformed into a murder case. The compound was considered a crime scene, and Victor Ambeye was declared a prime suspect in the murder. Mrs. Catherine's body was taken to a funeral home, while a manhunt was launched for Victor Ambeye. Victor had run away from the Kasarani area. After killing Mrs. Catherine, he had stolen her mobile phone and then went to a different area in Nairobi to hide out with his cousin. The police had a tough time tracking him, so they had to seek help from their counterparts at the Criminal Research and Intelligence Bureau, Nairobi. These detectives began their forensic analysis. They were said to have found a trail which they followed, and this became the game changer in the case. Victor was traced to his hideout in Kino, Nairobi, where he was hiding with his cousin, 22-year-old Collins Seda. Both of them were arrested and then taken into custody for further interrogation. At the police station, Victor confessed to killing Mrs. Catherine. According to him, before he was employed, they agreed on a certain amount of money to be paid as his salary. However, after completing his first month as her employee, the payment he received was less than what they had agreed on. This made him confront her to find out why he was being paid less than their agreed amount. This confrontation turned into an argument that got intense. It is not known what triggered Victor and Baye, but at some point, he picked up a blunt object and then struck Mrs. Catherine on the head, seriously injuring her in the process. He then proceeded to wrap her up with a blanket and then dumped her in a septic tank at the cattle farm to hide any evidence of his crime. After committing this heinous act, Victor stole Catherine's phone, switched it off, and then ran to his cousin's house to hide out. He later sold the stolen phone to 22-year-old Benjamin Kimani, who owned a phone repair shop. After getting this confession, the police proceeded to arrest Benjamin at his phone repair shop for buying the stolen mobile phone without official documents. At the time of making this video, the three suspects were still in police custody and were yet to be arraigned in court. Victor was said to have shown remorse for his actions. He told the police that dumping the body in the septic tank was his way of covering up the crime. This tragic story shows the importance of honoring agreements and also taking responsibility for the safety of our elderly family members. Victor's actions were shocking and inexcusable. No disagreement, no matter how serious, should ever lead to violence. If Victor felt cheated because he was paid less than promised, he could have easily reported the issue to Catherine's family or sought legal help instead of resorting to murder. His decision to harm an elderly woman, hide her body, and flee shows a complete disregard for human life and the trust placed in him. Such actions should be condemned in the strongest terms. This tragedy also shows how things could have been different if Catherine had someone staying with her. A family member or trusted companion at home might have provided extra protection and probably prevented Victor from acting on his anger. Elderly people, especially those living alone, are more vulnerable to such dangers, and families must take steps to ensure their safety. Regular check-ins, background checks on helpers, and open communication are crucial. May her soul rest in peace. It would be interesting to know the verdict given by the judge in this case. At the time of making this video, this case was still under active investigation. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel so that you will be notified whenever there is an update in this case. Thank you for watching and stay safe.